Good morning. I'm Randy Roberts, and we're at the Texas Decatur Gathering for rawhide. We've been asked to give a little demonstration on maybe how to get started to make a quirt and kind of go through all the steps. We're going to start to show you how to make a core, explain. We're going to explain everything. If you have questions, there's a lot of people on the gathering site that'd be more happy to help you. So we're just going to walk through kind of the tools, the rawhide part of it, the braiding part of it, and then we'll look at some finished products. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. First thing you want to do when you're going to make a quirt is you want to build your foundation or a core. Everything you do, this core is going to affect. So you want these cores to be real nice. You want to use your best rawhide. This core right here is a tapered core. Started with 2 inches of rawhide, glued and folded, then twisted. It was to get a nice taper like this for this style of quirt. Started with 2 inches up here and then just tapered that string just a little bit on both sides before we folded and glued it. This core right here is just a single twist core. It's just a piece of rawhide that's about 1 1/8 inches wide. And there's no glue involved. It's just twisted tight. You put a screw in one end in your table. In this end, you twist it, then pull it tight and put a screw here, and about every 4 hours, you just keep moving one screw and getting it tighter and tighter. About a week, it'll be so hard that it'll never bend. This type of core that is glued together will take a little bit more moisture. And being how this particular one I made, it's glued and then it's got 3 coats of urethane on it to really waterproof it. These type of cores can take a lot of moisture before they separate. A core like this is just naturally twisted and allowing the rawhide to get tight. If it gets wet, it could untwist itself. So it's real important on a single twisted core that you go ahead and put a layer of tape on it. The preferred layer of tape to go over a core like this to smooth it out, the preferred tape would be freezer tape. Freezer tape is waterproof and it's good for 40 below. So the conditions this finished quirt's going to be in, chances are that tape ever releases or changes anything are really minor. Regular paper tape or athletic tape, duct tape, electrical tape, all those things are going to change over time. And so the preferred tape to go under on a twisted core like this would be freezer tape. The glue that we use to glue these together is old-fashioned contact cement because it's also waterproof. Once it's dry, it's pretty tough to get it wet. It's the same glue that you use under laminate countertops in a bathroom. And so it really holds. Waynwood is the name of the contact cement. So after you get your core built, then the next thing you want to do is you want to figure out what size of string you want to braid on it. Most of these quirts, a 12 plait braid is plenty good enough. You want some report for that string to help hold that core, because whenever you get your quirt made, you don't want it real floppy. You want some life to it. Every step you take puts life back in it. So if you braid a little bit bigger string, it's a little bit thicker than normal, it'll add to that core, okay? So the way that I decide what size core, what size string I want, I'm going to use a piece of leather here to measure up and show because it's a little darker color than the rawhide, so it'll be easier to see for the camera. So what I like to do is I like to measure my core with my calipers, and I like to work in millimeters or thousandths. So what I do is I measure my core. If it's in thousandths, I times that by pi, which is 3.14. Then I'll divide that number by 6, and that will give me the size of string that will fit perfectly on this. Now, being how it's a quart body and not Rains or a Bozell, then I add 2/64 to the width of my string. That makes that thickness give you a little more report.
Is your 6 because you're using 12 strands?
12, yep, 6
so
because
it's
half of the amount of number of strings that you're going to use. for a 12.5-inch quirt. I call these a Nevada quirt because that's about the size that the Nevada cowboys use. They hang them on their chinks a lot. A 12.5-inch core is just fine, and then braid from there. All of these quirts on the table, we braid 6. If you're braiding 12, you're going to do an under 1, over 1 braid for your eye. It's really a good idea to put a little piece of rawhide in there, real round, or a piece of leather, something for a core to keep this from being too floppy. If it doesn't have a core in it, it's going to be real loose. And that's just long enough. I'd say you'd want about a 3.5-inch piece to braid that over, because then you cut it off when you come in here to go from 6 to 12. So we figure our string that way. We got our core, and now we braided our body. A braided body will look something similar to this when you're done. So you've got your eye here. And this joint, this is real pronounced here with these bigger strings. You come through there. I really suggest that before you start all of this, that you buy the Mike Hickey book, wrote under the pen name Tom Hall, because it has diagrams in that book that are really, really easy to follow to do these splices here. It doesn't really matter when you're starting if you got a mistake here, as long as it's back here on the core and it doesn't weaken your quirt. But the less mistakes you make, the better you'll like it. My friend Clint Haverty always says, never send anything out the door you got to make excuses for. If you're selling a quirt and you hand it to somebody and you're like, well, it's a pretty good quirt, I did a pretty good job, but I had a little couple mistakes on it, then if you're already making excuses for it, it doesn't satisfy your craftsmanship. So never send anything out the door you got to make excuses for. So once we get our bodies braided, I like to braid past the core at least 2 inches. Then you tie it back similar to this. And then you either hang it overnight with quite a bit of weight, put a ratchet strap on it, stretch all of this braid down as tight as you can get and let it dry. Then once you've got it all stretched down and it's all real nice and dry, then you cut the rest of that off. That gives you a nice blunt end to make the next step. What I like to do whenever I get ready to cut these off is I like to fill all this full of crazy glue. Dries pretty fast, and if you hit it with a hairdryer or something, it'll draw that glue in there and keep these strings from moving for the next step. But that gives you a nice finish edge. If they're all glued, you got 3 more layers going over that that's going to be glued, and you'll never have a problem with that end. Then the next step we like to do is we like to put an eye on them. This is real rough. It's not sanded or taken care of. This is kind of going to be the look we're going to go after when we're done. Like this one here is done just a little bit different, but it's the same method regardless, whether you fold it right in half or you fold it in thirds and roll it over. This is formed on a wooden dowel, and this part dries. So then when you go to glue this on, this particular one's going under the braid instead of over the top. Either way is fine. So this eye would be just put on here after this is glued. This would be cut the right width around here. And the way you find that width of what you want to cut this rawhide is you wrap your string around there, get it nice and tight, and then that's the measurement. Then you cut your rawhide half that width, because half of it goes on this side, half of it goes on that side. And a couple 3 inches of this is fine. Once you get that glued on and you got your eye all made and you're getting ready to glue it on, once you get it formed and glued on there, then don't be afraid to hit that with the sander again. You want that as smooth as you can get. You don't want any rough edges on the edges like this, because that'll magnify whenever you do your handle. Any hump in your foundation is going to be a hump under a button unless you correct it as you go. So you want to sand that fairly smooth, but not so thin that you've lost all your strength. Then when you go to put your Then whenever you go to put your foundation on, I like to use this leather here, and it helps a lot to put a layer of glue on there of that same contact cement and let it get totally dry. And go ahead and put some water on the leather on this side. Put you another coat of glue on this side and put your good coat of glue on your handle. And then once it's all glued and wet, it'll really be supple. It'll just mold around there like nobody's business. And then you want a pair of nice candle pliers. There's a dozen brands, and I'm not going to recommend a brand. These I'm not recommending, I'm just saying the ones in my hand are Osborne's, made by Osborne Tool Company. What you want to do is you want to squeeze that in so it'll stick with the glue. Once you get your candle plier in there, push that leather and that candle plier into each other so that you have a nice seal. Put that together, and once it's on there, let her dry. Make sure everything's glued and nice. Once you run down this leather with your candle pliers and get it squeezed in, if that contact cement was real dry when you put it on there, I'd say 20 minutes or so at least, if not a little longer. My old gold was, with contact cement, if you touch it and your finger sticks, it's too wet. If it comes off on your finger, it's too wet. When you touch that, it should be dry. It shouldn't stick on your fingers, but it should still be a little sticky. And that, if you do it that way, you won't get it off. So make sure you do a good job. It's real important. Keep these edges of this leather lined up. When you cut your leather, it's real important that it's square. You need to use a small framing square when you cut your edges so that they're nice and square. You know, you want all your edges nice and square because those are your guides when you come around here. And that's the way you get your foundation, the handle on to braid your button over. Then it's everybody's different way of doing foundations for their buttons. So this little quirt here, it's got a under 3 sequence with a braided button. So it's braided on under 1 over 1, make your pairs, come back, and then go back again and make pairs again and split them. So it's an under 3 sequence. I personally really like a pretty fine string from my handle. I want it really, really smooth because if you're actually using it, you want it smooth to feel good in your hand. Once you get you always want to do your handle or your heel knot or your long knot here, you always want to do that first on your quirt so that you can line your V's up so whenever you do your next buttons, you can keep them in line. Straight is a good idea on all braiding. The way way braiders really judge your work is they look down your work and look to see if all these V's are perfectly straight. That is a huge part of quality control, keeping things straight. When I get ready to put this handle on a foundation like this, just as I get ready, I'm going to put a bunch of straight lines so that I got lines to follow as I braid it. My lines are going to be lined up with my V's in my braiding. If they're a quarter turn off, it's not going to look right. So if you braid from this end, your V's are going to run this way. If you braided your body this way, you want to braid your handle on that way. You don't want to turn it around or your V's will be reversed. And it'll look like purple in a white coat. It just ain't going to look good. So once you get your foundation built, this one here, this handle here, it has the leather, then it has 1 layer of freezer tape on it. And then it's got 2 little tiny collars, leather like this here. And I beveled the top edge real strong to give it a round deal so my button will flow over the top of it. I want a really nice ledge on the bottom of this because I want it to close up real nice and tight there. For one, I don't want a lot of moisture getting in there. So this will have 2 raises. And then I put another raise down here just to make all this stuff come together. So the only added color in this, like an interweave color that this quirt would probably have would be in this longer button here, just to give it a little color. So once we're braiding, we got our foundations on, then we do our handles. One thing we'll back up here. This quirt right here is right in the midst of things. When you get ready to cut this off to give your look like this, what you want to do is you want to make sure when you cut that off, you cut a little bit of that core off. That way everything's solid. If you stay out here in the loose ones, you won't be able to keep them glued down. You put a layer of glue on it, let it dry, hit it with a hair dryer or whatever, get that glue real dry, and then you cut it off. We've been using a little hacksaw like this to cut them off. It's not too labor intensive, but it's real fine tooth, and that's what you want. You can use a PVC cutter, a big PVC cutter that has those that helps with the strength to cut it. There ain't too many guys that's strong enough to cut that off in one lick with a cutter, so either saw it or get big PVC cutter you can jack it together and it'll work its way through there and keep it straight. Once we get it glued on, once we get her done, then I take it to the belt sander and I sand this around and get this real supple and real nice. So when we go to put this on, we don't have any sharp edges, okay? Then that'll go on there, glued on there, and then we'll just sand that up and make that look real nice. Then we put our leather on and we're good to go. So these are some of the finished products that we've got here. This is an awful nice quirt. It's got a little bit of fid work here in the middle. Got some special buttons on it. This is made by a real world-class braider. But, you know, like this one, it's made by a real world-class braider that a lot of us really look up to. This one right here is made by a good friend of mine. And you know, when you put them all together, they're all nice looking quirts. You know, got a lot of nice fine string in it. Got a nice little, I like a wrist handle that just barely goes around my wrist. So if I'm carrying it like this and I'm actually going to use it, it's right there to go to work with. You ride all day with that on your wrist. You know, so you don't want to make your wrist handles too big or too gaudy or a lot of extra buttons and that kind of stuff on it. You just want something real simple there. So if you're using it all the time, it'll hang. If you want to make one that's real fancy and then you're pretty much guaranteed it's going to hang on the wall, then you can doctor that up some. But, you know, this short button handle here, I do about a 5-inch handle on my, I cut my leather about 5 inches wide. So my handle will be a little bit bigger than this quirt. But you know, for an everyday riding quirt, that fits your hand good too. So that's all personal preference. Talk a little bit about quality of material to use. We've talked about glue. Good skirting leather is an important product to have in any braider shop. You know, so you can build your foundations. There's a lot of guys that build their foundations up with string. And if I'm not mistaken, this button right here is built up with string. I'm almost thinking that this end is built up with string too. So when you look at them and you really inspect them and stuff, if you don't want to work with leather, you know, one's got leather underneath it, one's got string underneath it. But the bottom line is, both foundations were done very, very well. They don't have any humps or don't have any bumps. So if you're a new braider and you're struggling and you want to make one, all you got to do is keep in mind, keep your string big enough that you got some body, make a good core to work with it. So you make you a nice core, make good strings. And you know, one of the biggest things that we all have, you know, that new braiders and braiders have a problem with is temper. This string right here, see how supple that string is? You run your hand down that string like that, and if it's too dry, you're going to have cuts in your hand. Okay, this is just, it's fresh cut. It's not beveled or nothing. So one of the ways to check if your rawhide's good is run your hand down it. If the first inch of it's uncomfortable on your bare hand, you're probably too dry. And if you're running your hand down that rawhide and it's getting wet, you're probably too wet. So what I like to do is I like to squeeze that rawhide. If it squeezes together and if it's deep, if I can distort that rawhide, it's probably too wet. When I bend that rawhide like that, if it falls back in its exact shape, it's too wet. You've got to have some life to your material. You know, this has been in the bag here for a couple days. We've been cutting a lot of string around here out of this little bag. So some of it's got pretty dry, some of it's pretty wet. It just all depends on how many times it's been out of the bag and cut. This little dyed rawhide, this is harvest brown color. And I can tell when I'm unrolling it, it's a different temperature than that other one is. It's cooler, so it's wetter. Just by reaching in the bag, blindfolded, I can reach in there and get the wettest string because I can feel that with my fingers. So you see, there we are. I would consider this piece of rawhide perfect to work. You can still see it, but it pretty much went away. So it's not too wet, but it's not too dry. And there again, when I run my hand down that string and I get them kinks out of that string, it comes straight. It doesn't hurt my hands. I see so many braiders and I hear about so many braiders. If you're building a quirt, there's no reason in the world to be wearing leather gloves on your hands and be braiding. If this rawhide is the right wetness, the right temper, and was cased up right, it's soft enough that it's not cutting your hands. One of the things that I do want to show that's going to be just a little bit harder with where we don't have one made, but we're just going to pretend like we're braiding this X here. And this is all braided up here like this. When I'm braiding on something like this, I got me a lot of soap right here, above my braid. I don't ever wipe this whole string down with water or soap when I'm braiding. I'm only going to do the part I'm working. I'm going to maintain my moisture. If you spend so much time putting water on this to keep that whole string exactly right the whole time you're braiding, it's never going to be right. So the way I braid my rawhide is, we'll just pretend I got a dozen strings down here I'm braiding. I got my pile of soap. I pull my string, take my thumb, soap that string about that far. Then I make my X. Then the next one. I pull it to get the tension I want. Take a little bit on my thumb, put a little more soap on there. Now I've had people say, well, the end of that string is going to get dry. When I'm totally done braiding that, I've cased that rawhide with that soap so many times, it's not dry. It'll still be just like that. Without spraying water on it, without wiping it continually with a wet rag. The important part about that is that it's cased right to start with. If this rawhide don't have any interior moisture in it, you're not going to be able to hold it. It's going to get dry on you. So casing your string's real important. No matter what project you're going to build here, whether it's an artist piece, an everyday cowboy piece, or something in between, none of it's going to turn out if you don't learn how to case your rawhide and do a good job. I've tried to give you the tools or the knowledge how to get started on a quirt, but there's other things that you've got to have. A lot of guys really like a pair of rounding pliers. These were made by Brandon Anthony, and they're a little rounder. They work real nice to work your string. It ain't against the law. They ain't going to take your birthday away when you're braiding if you see you got a little hump and you just stop and work your pliers with it and get that down to where you can pull it on down. You can braid in a rounder and pull it through a rounder. to keep it straight or whatever. And then the real preferred method, when you get it all braided and you're done, we ain't gonna hurt this cord, it's dry. I mean, it doesn't need rolled anymore because it's already dry. When you get done braiding and you get your ends tied off like I showed earlier, when you get all that done before you stretch it, I really recommend wrapping her up in plastic for 30 minutes and let the whole thing get back to the same even playing field and be all the same moisture. When you're braiding along, this is going to be drier than this no matter what you do. So if you just take the last of that soap and run it up and down your body, put it in a bag and let it all retemper, now you're back on an even playing field. Let her set out in the air for a few minutes, and then just take a good, nice, smooth board. This is a real smooth piece of oak right here. And it's about 3 inches wide, which would be about the preferred width I'd want to roll with. I like to roll it on a piece of granite, something really slick. The slicker the surface is, the slicker the braid. You just take that and put a lot of pressure on and just roll that body back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, till when you run your hands over it, you like the way it feels. And that's how you get them nice smooth bodies. So a rolling stick would be one of the very most important tools. You know, you've got to have a string cutter, you've got to have a splitter unless you're going to order your strings pre-made, and all you got to do is temper them and braid them. There's a few guys around the country that do that, but very few. You know, in my own defense, I'm probably one of the more popular guys to buy string from. But if you're going to become a rawhider, you really need to have your own tools. You need to make your, you know, there's some really nice string cutters out there for sale. You know, it all depends on how you want to work them. I recommend you go on all the videos and you watch all the different string cutters. I can name off 4 or 5 of them. I just don't think we want to do a sales pitch for anybody on tools today, but you got to learn to cut a good string before you ever go to work to braid, make cords, or anything. Practice cutting string, practice getting your temper. Once you get that down, it'll make the whole project go so much better. You cut a good string, good quality, consistent string. In everything we do with rawhide, consistency, consistency, consistency. If you don't make a good consistent core, you can't make a good project. If you don't cut a good consistent string, you can't braid a good project. If you don't use good consistent material, you can't have a good finished product. If you don't, you know, a lot of guys like to constantly be reinventing the wheel. I'm going to try this kind of soap, and I'm going to try this kind, and I'm going to do that. Pick one alley to go down and stay in that alley until you get good at that, then branch out. You know, I mean, if you're going to want to build quirts, build the exact same size quirt 20 times in a row. Then you'll be able to build a quirt. To become a world master in this braiding, to become really good, you can never reach perfection if you're willing to accept imperfection. Never send anything out the door you got to make excuses for. So practice, practice, practice. Buy good quality tools, a good little metal square so you can square up your foundation material, nice little good metal ruler, rounding set of pliers, needle nose pliers, you know, just simple stuff, a good set of calipers, string cutter and a splitter, and you're kind of off and going if you buy your string or buy a Sogas. You know, most people that are starting out this really don't have a lot of business start to making the rawhide. Unless you use good rawhide, you don't know what you're trying to make. So, and yeah, I make a lot of rawhide and I sell a lot of rawhide. It's not a sales pitch. I don't want anybody to think it's a sales pitch. It's my own personal opinion. If you're going to build a house, you don't learn by being a logger. Learn to cut the wood, plane the wood, kiln grind the wood. To to build the house. After you've built 10 houses and you know what kind of lumber you want, then you can make your own. So I really recommend that. I think we're just going to wrap it up, and there again, if you know anybody that watches this video that gets it from Whitney, if you have questions, don't be afraid to go on our Rawhide Gathering page on Facebook. We got lots and lots of people that are on there that spend hours with you helping you. So, okay.
The one thing is you don't have to have all the modern tools. A lot of the masters, Ortega's one of them. He just had a handle of a hammer handle with some grooves cut in it, and notches and all this and that, and a pocket knife and a whetstone. You got to have your tools sharp. But modern equipment has made it easier for us. We have sharper tools, our razor blades or carpet blades, whatever we use to cut with, and we've also got root sticks where we can strop our blades if we're so inclined to. If you're tight like I am, I strop the tar out of them so I don't have to put new ones on there. But sharp tools are essential for this deal. That's all they got to say. You don't have to have the most modern tools. You can get by the pocket knife and stick. But boy, it's a lot easier if you have all the good stuff. And we're men, we got to have the good toys.
That's right.
If you don't believe me, ask Mike Hickey.
That's right, gotta have tools.
End of story.
In connection with what Glenn with Louis Ortega, and they even visited each other and stayed for a week kind of thing. And so Frank thought he wanted to have Mr. Ortega use one of his string cutters. So he sent one of these $300 string cutters to Louis Ortega. And a couple of weeks later, a package arrived in the mail, and Louis thanked him very much for the nice string cutter and said, "I thought I'd send you one of mine." It was a sledgehammer handle with 3 notches cut in it.